Привіт, мене звати Ангеліна Карякіна. Це подкаст «Коли все має значення». Я Ангеліна Карякіна, а зі мною
Наталка Гуменюк.
І ми для вас цього випуску привезли цікавезну розмову аж з Тайваня. Цю розмову ми з Наталкою записували разом, але перш ніж до неї перейти, Наталко, давай розкажемо принаймні 2 слова, що ми там робили і яка була наша мета цього далекого, але дуже продуктивного візиту.
А я додам, ми зараз так з Ліною будемо говорити, бо ми, здається, в нас дуже довгий день повернення з далекого острова, да, ми тільки що з дороги.
Понад 30 годин ми їхали.
У Тайвані ми були учасниками однієї з найбільших правозахисних конференцій у світі – RightsCon, оскільки не секрет, що Тайвань – країна особлива, дуже близька нам за рівнем загрози. Вони живуть зараз з постійною якоюсь думкою про те, що їх може захопити Китай. Це одна з найдемократичніших країн Азії в тому числі. І в нас було велике бажання скористатися такою можливістю. Є величезна підтримка тайванцями України, величезна зацікавленість. Тому, окрім цього, скориставшись цим візитом і нашим виступом на конференції, ми влаштовували там величезну кількість заходів, покази документальних фільмів про воєнні злочини до річниці повномасштабного вторгнення, це лекції в університетах, це воркшоп з місцевими представниками громадянського суспільства, аналітиками щодо секретів демократичної стійкості, участь у хакатоні, розмови з тайванською молоддю, зокрема, знову ж таки, про досвід України і окрема кількість велика зустрічей із представниками влади, з представниками громадянського суспільства, з журналістами. І ми привезли не один подкаст з Тайваня, але цей, скажу чесно, і для мене особливий, тому що ця людина мала в нас бути. Це перша міністерка цифрових справ Тайваню Одрі Танг. Вона щойно завершила свою роботу на цій посаді, але Одрі вважається однією з найбільших мислительок, інтелектуалок у світі. Вона є розробницею, вона є однією, скажімо так, з лідерів у всьому, що стосується цифрових технологій у світі. З нею, з Одрі Танг, ми поговорили.
Її в якусь окрему категорію насправді складно віднести, тому що, так, з одного боку вона представляла в нашій розмові представників влади, там, навіть після того, як вона пішла зі свого офісу. З іншого боку, вона яскрава представниця громадянського суспільства, але дійсно її візійність – це щось геть окремо. Тобто ми говорили з людиною, яка в дитинстві була генієм, стала генієм-розробницею програмного забезпечення, але насправді ця людина мислить про демократію, залучення суспільства, відкриті системи і там відкрите суспільство на якихось абсолютно там космічних рівнях і якимсь чином втілює їх через цифрові рішення. Тому наша розмова десь була поміж цінностями демократії і реальними цифровими інструментами, які їй на своїй посаді і загалом Тайваню вдалося втілити. Давай трохи про неї розкажемо, так? Що це за людина?
Часто звертають увагу на те, що вона є першою в історії Тайваню міністеркою-трансгендеркою. Це, звісно, важлива частина її особистості, її персоналії, те, що стосується її небінарності, її множинності, в тому, як вона бачить там світ, плюралізм. Але, напевно, важливо додати, що ми зараз живемо в світі, в якому ми зараз трошки боїмося новітніх технологій, особливо коли ми слідкуємо за тим, що відбувається в Кремнієвій долині, так, боїмося про цифрової диктатури, скажімо так, і бачимо певні риси. Ось Одрі Танг є фактично ідеологом протилежного, про те, як насправді технології можуть демократизувати, надавати де-факто більше прав людям в реальності, і що технології можна використовувати інакше. І це якби дискусія не теоретична, так, а ось упродовж десятиліть вона будує і створює інструменти, які дійсно показують, що технологія може бути технологією включення, залучення більшої кількості думок, замість просто тієї думки, що є якісь там магнати-олігархи, які одноосібно можуть контролювати світ завдяки новітнім технологіям. І от в цьому є і відмінність, і таких людей на такому рівні в світі, я б сказала, ідеологів не так і багато, вона якби одна, напевно, з ключових у світі.
Так, радше розмови про те, що технології можуть служити чомусь хорошому, світлому майбутньому, відкритому демократичному суспільству. Для мене до зустрічі з Одрі це були якісь трошки ідеалістичні розмови, трохи ні про що, які складаються з якихось гасел. А тут дійсно розмова вийшла про дуже конкретні інструменти, але мені здається, важливо пояснити, що і тайванське суспільство все-таки відрізняється від інших суспільств. По всьому світу все-таки є білі лицарі діджиталу, які намагаються щось хороше втілити і зменшити негативний вплив алгоритмів, але тайванське суспільство з тих багатьох зустрічей, на яких ми побували, і почувши від багатьох людей їхні думки про те, як у них все функціонує, нехай це навіть і трошки бульбашка громадянського суспільства, ніби відчуваю, що воно змушене співіснувати з різними, можливо, поглядами на різні речі, тому що якщо вони не будуть єдиними і об'єднаними, вони можуть поставити під загрозу всю країну.
Я би додала, якщо вони не будуть демократичними, і на цьому нам наполягали, вони не маючи визнання, не є визнаною незалежною країною, але де-факто є суверенною країною, саме їхня демократичність робить їх суверенними, так, і змушує світ, не тільки вона, але через це вони співпрацюють з світом. Тому демократія для них дійсно є величезною цінністю, але до таких цінностей ХХ століття, так, Одрі додає практичні інструменти цифрових технологій, щоб цю демократію зберігати і посилювати, так, в той час, коли багато хто може сказати, що демократії слабкі.
Зосередимось на тому, що можна слухати, навіть не розуміючи, мені здається, глибоко якоїсь специфіки. Це дійсно, для мене абсолютно революційні речі у питаннях, які стосуються не просто залучення громадян до обговорення якихось важливих державних речей, але і якихось маленьких, практичних речей від суперечок, чи носити маски і які самі маски носити під час епідемії, в тому випадку, про який ми говорили з Одрі, це був ковід, до питань, які стосуються одностатевих шлюбів, в який спосіб вони змогли запропонувати конструктивний діалог стосовно цього питання і вийти навіть на якесь рішення. Абсолютно для мене революційне.
В цьому випадку це була фізична зустріч, ми познайомилися вперше. Я дуже хотіла, тому що знала про Одрі вже багато років, і це був прекрасний привід зустрітися, будучи там. І вона ще й неймовірно приємною виявилася людиною. І, здається, я мушу сказати, це, певно, перший випадок, коли спікерка прислала нам у відповідь ідеальну розшифровку інтерв'ю, тому що вона записує всі свої нотатки, розшифровує їх, користуючись, напевно, якимись кращими інструментами штучного інтелекту, так, і тому вона після розмови дуже ввічливо сказала: ось коли що є розшифровка. Я такого ніколи не бачила на своєму шляху, тому я за це страшенно вдячна. Це також багато про що вказує, про цю людину.
До речі, вона документує з різних причин своє життя тривалий час. Має вийти найближчими днями якесь документальне кіно про неї. Як я вже казала, це в дитинстві, це дитина геній, яка раніше закінчила школу, навіть не закінчила, а пішла з неї займатися програмуванням. І з її слів навіть вчителі погодились, що їй не обов'язково ходити на уроки, вона робить інші речі набагато крутіше. Людина, яка працювала в Кремнієвій долині, програмувала безпосередньо сама. Але і знаєш, яка річ ще мені теж запала? От ми говорили, багато хто в Тайвані дійсно не потребував якогось глибокого контексту про Україну, але з Одрі це було ще крутіше, ще глибше, тому що, ти пам'ятаєш, ми про щось говорили, намагалися якісь аналогії висувати, а вона каже, ну так у вас же є Прозоро, або там ще щось. Тобто людина, яка ще й дуже круто розуміється на діджитал-практиках, інструментах, в тому числі України.
Дійсно, в неї і складне, і непросте життя, тому що вона народилася з певною хворобою серця, які їй казали, що їй важливо дожити до операції, яку зробили в 12 років, а до цього їй сказали, що якщо вона буде занадто емоційною, буде занадто засмучуватися або занадто радіти, фактично відчувати якісь такі пограничні емоції, вона може постійно вмерти. Тому вона все життя мала себе стримувати, принаймні для того, щоб вижити. Їй зробили цю операцію. Тобто є дуже багато якихось інших життєвих деталей, але я думаю, важливо просто сказати, що ось це той випадок, коли ти приходиш, ти розумієш, що це непересічна людина. І виходиш з цієї розмови і думаєш, нам пощастило за свого життя зустрітися з непересічною людиною, яка для цього світу є реальним інноватором.
Ну що ж, ми ділимося цією вдачею з вами. З радістю запрошуємо вас до цієї розмови, нашої розмови з Одрі Танг у Тайпей, Тайвані.
І ще одна нова річ для нас. Ми досі не зверталися до вас за підтримкою. Не секрет, що у багатьох громадських організаціях зараз непрості часи, зокрема, які стосуються фінансування. Ми дуже любимо працювати над подкастом, коли все має значення, але він існує поза всіма проектами, і тому важливою буде підтримка нашої редакторсько-режисерської команди, яка перекладає, монтує, працює, і без яких цей подкаст не міг би виходити. Отож, від зараз ви можете бачити на нашому сайті, а також на частині платформ, лінки на реквізити в різній валюті. Отож, якщо у вас виникла думка підтримати цей подкаст, будь ласка, дуже-дуже дякуємо. So I want to introduce ourselves. So we are Ukrainian journalists. We're both co-founders of the organization called Public Interest Journalism Lab. We had a lot of experience in Ukrainian independent media. We used to work in the independent media. Now, one of the major projects we work is on the documenting war crimes. We're collecting testimonies of the survivors for history, for litigation. But almost 5 years ago, exactly 5 years ago, we co-founded this organization called Public Interest Journalism Lab with the only idea. There is that we thought that the idea of debunking fakes, is kind of not that efficient because it makes you live according to the discourse of the people who create these fakes.
Exactly, you need to pre-bunk. We learned that lesson 10 years ago.
And one of our also good colleagues is Peter Pomerantsev, the British-Ukrainian scholar, researcher of propaganda. We were at the time thinking that what is happening in Ukraine with the polarization in the country is used for exploit vulnerabilities and create the division. So we created this organization which aim was to investigate how we can create public interest journalism which depolarize. So that's when we learned about you.
It's like a mask, vaccine, and cure for the infodemic.
Yeah, and our first project was on COVID.
When we were founded the organization, which was pretty new, and it was during particular type of crisis we also have, I really read a lot about you. I went to listen to the conferences I found in Austin, elsewhere, because actually it was an inspiration and a model. That story about Uber, the other thing. So you have a very specific role in establishing our organizations 5 years ago. Honored. Thank you. But I still, before that, when I'm just having a lengthy introduction, but I really want to say, and since then, I really wanted, that would be an opportunity to interview, to do this, to do that, maybe, and then the full-scale invasion hit, and we all were focused on the war crime. So when I yesterday was also kind of rewatching these interviews Like I felt like I'm returned to the peaceful time when we were dealing with COVID. So therefore, I probably just really want to explain, because that was, it's very hard to understand the complicated concepts. At the time, we just heard like there is this Minister of Digital Affairs in Taiwan. There are some cool people who are trying to find the solution on how to depolarize society by algorithm, by programming. Just after telling that story about Uber, I understood what exactly is the thinking, and I'm giving a lot of examples about that to a lot of people. Maybe just let us start with that. So what kind of things you're speaking about, the depolarization?
So I actually started this work in 2014. So that's even before I went into the cabinet as a minister in 2016. In 2014, the trust level in Taiwan was very low. President Ma Ying-jeou at the time was enjoying an approval rate of 9%, which means that in our country of 24 million people, anything the President said 20 million people may be against that. And so the society was quite polarized around one particular issue, which is the trade agreement with Beijing. And so on March that year, there was the sunflower movement where people took matter to their own hands. And we call ourselves demonstrators, not just protesters. So we're not just against something. We're also pro something, pro transparency. At the time, it was opaque in Taiwan. And so people were very anxious about like secret deals with Beijing. And that really polarized our society. And so when we were in the occupied parliament, peaceful for 3 weeks, 500,000 people on the street, many more online, they all want to deliberate about the ideas of trade service agreements. But if it's online, if it's on, say, Facebook or other places, people become polarized very easily because the algorithm rewards polarization and extremism. So we instead designed our own form of media, what we call pro-social media, that brings people closer, that gives more voice to the bridges, not the extremes. And that was held by the physical facilitators around the occupied parliament, and also the online forums by the G0V or Gov0 people who built transparency tools, much like Prozoro, for civic technologies that, for example, open up the budget for visualization and things like that. So the civic tech people, the online people, and the offline facilitators joined hands during the Occupy and produced, after 3 weeks, a very cohesive set of ideas that the Speaker of the Parliament at the time, Wang Jinping, simply said, okay, you have a point. We agree. Go home. Right. So this is one of the very few Occupy that resulted in a constructive role. And so at the end of that year, I was tapped as the young mentor, kind of reverse mentor advisor to the cabinet of Minister Jacqueline Tsai at the time, and also Vice Premier Simon Zhang, who then put together this idea of online participation. So instead of having each controversy trigger another Occupy, which would be too much, the people thought maybe we can do the process online. And so Uber the next year was one of the controversial topics. So instead of having people shout at each other saying this is extractive economy, this is sharing economy, at no end, we just asked people, how do you feel about the Uber situation? And the pro-taxi people, pro-union people, the people who are pro-rural development, the people who are pro-insurance and so on, they see themselves in this visualization among one of the clusters of people who share similar feelings. But this is not a headcount. This is not voting. This is rewarding the bridges. So anyone who can propose something that draws those groups together ends up having agenda-setting power. So we made a new law about the diversified taxis so that Uber can operate, but also the local co-ops. The surge pricing was allowed, but not undercutting existing meters, so on and so forth. So very nuanced, uncommon ground that was built from this process. And this process then also informed many of the other controversies to be resolved in this way in Taiwan, so that by 2016, when Dr. Tsai Ing-wen became our president, in her inauguration speech, she said, like before, democracy used to be a showdown between two opposing sides. But from this point onwards, democracy needs to be a conversation among all the different sides. And so I was then tapped as the digital minister at the end October of 2016 to lead this change.
Can I ask you about the concept of social innovation that was introduced, as far as I understand, in Taiwan, just generally across the whole government, and social innovation action plan. What is this kind of doctrine? And could you just explain a little bit?
So the idea of social innovation is that innovation should not just be for the people, it should be with the people. So top-down technological innovation sometimes force people to comply to the innovator's worldview. So, for example, Uber makes the drivers adhere to the Uber algorithm. Unless we can steer it from the taxi driver side, it is owned by a few, not by the people. And so, for example, in India, there's this union movement against Uber, but instead of just protesting on the demand side, they moved to the supply side and made its own Uber-like app like TalkTalk. In Taiwan, we also have similar things like Xiao Xing and so on. And that is the innovation that is done with the people. And the logic, the programming and so on responds to the actual needs of the people instead of the innovator somewhere in Silicon Valley or somewhere in Beijing, things like that. So basically it is innovation that is responding to a societal need, and the innovators are everyday people. So with the people, not just for the people. That is the basic idea. And the social innovation action plan basically draws resource, for example, through university responsibility programs, the University Social Responsibility, USR, a lot of capstone projects done by the undergrad people and so on, end up feeding into social innovation. So instead of teaching the student to compete with one another only in a very capitalistic fashion, they complete their grade by helping out, by innovating with their community, solving the community problems, and also getting the school credit for it. And we also have in the basic education, the civic competence plan, so that by 2022, our 15-year-old, according to the International Citizenship and Civic Standard Study, ICCS, among OECD equivalents, our 15-year-old are top of the world when it comes to the feeling of competence in the civic realm. They can set an agenda for the civil society, and also they can start very powerful petitions that change the course of Taiwanese society, not just banning plastic straws, but also going to school 1 hour later because 1 more hour sleep is better for the grades than 1 more hour study. Also crowdfunding a first museum for menstruation, and within 2 years just remove the taboo around periods, which is no mean feat actually in the Asia society. And the innovator Vivian also became a cabinet level youth advisor. Actually, the petitioner for the banning plastic straw, Wang Xuanru, was also a cabinet level youth advisor. So just uplifting the 17-year-olds and so on, the social innovators into cabinet level advisory positions, and also get the impact investors so that when they form social enterprises, they can get the impact investment they need to accelerate their ideas, and also turn those infrastructure idea that they come up with the national infrastructure budget through presidential hackathon to uplift 5 teams every year. I can go on, but there's many, many resources.
In Ukraine, we are very proud of our online kind of governance for the system Diia, which has 130 services, very cozy, and also beyond being very useful and handy for the people, it really prevent a lot of problems and troubles. So, for instance, the paperless country helped us to avoid in 2022 refugee crisis and internally displaced crisis, because in 2014 we had it. And the country and the state was more or less stopped in some places physically because people cared not about real needs, but I lost some paper, without this paper I couldn't do that. So if, for instance, by 2022 we didn't have this service, that would be really, really very, very bad, tough, create kind of anxiety, crises, and whatsoever. And this platform is used on, numerous things, logistics, now about the military draft. But after listening to a lot of, and looking what makes Taiwanese approach different, what is ours is just clearly services for the people. It's purely services. Make them easy. They help to fight corruption, for instance. Transparency helps to fight corruption, access for the documents. Everything is about the state provide the service. It's a good idea, but there is no this philosophy of participation. It's a very different idea of the, Ministry of Digital Affairs.
No, but for example, we have this voting for like Eurovision Song Contest through Diia and some other things when the government wants to hear the voices. But it's rather working, upside down.
So in Taiwan, the citizens set the agenda through petitions.
Yeah, that's not the case.
So that's why, for me, the question is, actually, what is at heart? Because it's all about digital technology, all is kind of good for people. What is at heart of it? You said that, is it participation or technology? And how you enforce this principle to the people, to the government, that it's not just user-friendly, as we today say. We're speaking about user-friendly services for the people, but it's not about democracy to that much. So how you insert democracy in that? Why you think it's critical for you? Why it's such a priority issue for you? On ideological level, why it's a more priority than building a lot of good services?
So now I'm the Shu Wei cyber ambassador. I used to be the Shu Wei digital minister. But in Mandarin, Shu Wei means not just digital. It also means plural. So when it's just a singular, we say 一位. When there's more than one, we say 数位, quite a few, many. And so 数位literally means plural, like many. So going back to the inauguration speech of Dr. Tsai Ing-wen, so to me, digital minister or digital ambassador is also the minister for or ambassador for plurality. And plurality is a very different vision than singularity. Singularity is technology doing everything. And automating away all the human work. But plurality is the collaboration across differences. So fostering the differences, but not letting them, the conflict become like fire that goes like wildfire, destroying things, but harnessing the fire as energy for the democracy to co-create. So that's ideological philosophy of plurality.
Wow, it's just interesting how it really works on the level of, like government, how it really works. If you could explain us through some simple examples. I mean, we can understand because we're really like a digital state now, but still there's this idea is not behind these services.
One of the principles of our plural technologies was adopted by Twitter when it was still called Twitter. And it's called, at the time, Birdwatch. Now it's called Community Notes. Maybe you have heard of it. Zuckerberg now say they're also doing community notes, and YouTube also. So like everybody is doing community notes. The community notes is based on this bridging approach where you see a post maybe by Elon, and then people have different context, maybe correcting him, maybe adding important context, and then those notes are voted by other people, like a jury. But the algorithm is different. Instead of the most count wins, like the normal voting, which tend to basically let people get astroturfing, a lot of trolling accounts, just upvote this one single thing up, right? It doesn't do that. It first, again, like the Uber example, it clusters people, like the left wing and the right wing and so on, because they don't agree with each other. And then only the notes that gets upvote from both sides, the both wing, the up wing, gets featured as the top vote. So you have to actually convince the other side for your idea to be voted up. This is called a bridging algorithm. And so one very concrete example, aside from the Uber one, was the example around marriage equality in Taiwan. Back in 2018, we had 4 referendums about marriage equality. And two sides very strongly opinionated. And one side simply said that, the same-sex people should have the same rights and duties as heterosexuals. But the other side was very afraid that the family hierarchy will be disrupted and so on. And so using, again, these kind of tools on the join platform, the e-participation platform, people can have their opinions. There's upvote, there's downvote, but there's no reply button. So there's no room for trolls to grow. And then when we look at the upwing, the both side voted up ideas, they're the uncommon ground. So when we legalized marriage equality in Taiwan, we did it in a separate law. And that says only 2 individuals marry, but their families don't marry. So in Mandarin, we say 结婚 when two individuals marry. We say 结姻 when two families marry. But this is only the individuals and not their families. So if you're of the rights and duties camp, this is a superior form of marriage because your duty is less supporting the extended family or conflict of interest or things like that. This is a better form of marriage. But if you're of a traditional like family kin, because we have in Mandarin a lot of words to describe the extended family. So people were afraid that we'll have to invent new words.
Like mother, father-in-law, or
two son-in-laws, we have a son-in-law if you have a son.
Exactly. And so because then in Taiwan, when the two same-sex persons marry, then they only wed. Their families don't marry. So it's just the bylaw. But not the father-in-law, not the mother-in-law, not the in-law. It's a new design. And so because of that, after the law passed, actually both sides depolarize very quickly. They can see that their ideas are being reflected by this uncommon ground. So it is important to have not just referendum, which is direct democracy, but also deliberative democracy that discover this uncommon ground.
We are where we are today in the world when we kind of see a bit of the backslash when community notes were popular, but now with everything which is happening in social media, actually, let's say liberals and progressive are very much afraid of technology, because you see that it can be an oligarchy as well. It can be the rule of, couple autocrats, which just very much, enlightened by knowing algorithm and the way how to work, could be also very rich. We can speak about Elon Musk. We can speak about what's going on Facebook. So what is your take on that? Also on the philosophical level, because people have now just last half a year, of course, we live in the context of the war against Ukraine, but wherever you go, in the media, anywhere, people are just freaking out because AI, they're afraid. And with what Elon is doing online, people are just really freaking out.
These people represent technology, and people think that this is how technology looks like nowadays.
So what is your take on actually what is going on and how you can promote something else? What is your argument? And aren't you concerned as well that, that would be singularity instead of plurality, because it's for them, it's singularity. It looks like that it's singularity is enforced today.
Yeah, this is a great question. And for example, just a couple of days ago, I launched with the help of many other fellow advisors, this platform with the California government called Engaged California with Gavin Newsom. And the idea here is that we are using the same technology we just talked about, the bridge making, the uncommon ground, with the Californian people. So 40 million people, more people than Taiwan, on a simple issue, how to recover from the LA wildfire.
Wow.
Right. And how to, build back better. Right? And so this is important because just like the Uber urgency or the pandemic urgency or other urgencies, there is no pro-wildfire party, right? It is not a partisan thing. And so it unifies even a polarized constituency because people just had a very large-scale experience of devastation, and now people are in their kind of community spirit, and that is the fertile ground for plurality, because then people see the different ideas, the divergence of different concerns and so on being kind of temporarily put aside, and the idea of a shared security infrastructure around fire damage become top of their mind. And so to your first question, I think technology does not have to look like one single person dictating what to do. It can also be the other way around. Instead of one person broadcasting, which is what sometimes X feels like nowadays, just one person broadcasting their ideas, it could be broad listening. To have millions of people listen to one another, figure out uncommon ground, and then turning into swift action, for example, on wildfire recovery. So this is one example I give. And also because I am a bridge, and I just mentioned Gavin Newsom, I have also to mention the other side. So I was last week also on the show of Laura Loomer, who is a famous MAGA right influencer. And Laura was also very much interested in this idea of pro-social media, because they also have different experiences of, maybe Elon Musk or maybe the previous Twitter and so on, kind of silencing their voices because they were seen as fringe or extreme or hate or things like that. So very interestingly, on both sides of the political aisle, we have people who feel that this singular broadcasting media is not serving the needs of their community, even though they're very different communities, and they are now feeling the same urgency. And because both are using free software, open source. So on this side, maybe Blue Sky is free software, like Diia. On the other side, Truth Social, also open source, also free software. So technically, we can actually bridge them together so that people on Truth Social can see the uncommon ground from Blue Sky, and people on Blue Sky can see the uncommon ground from Truth Social. And together, that again is plurality. It's better than the single platform dictating what should be trending in the day, but rather what should be trending is the surprising validators across the political aisle on shared urgency issues such as wildfire recovery.
Can I ask a question about impact and how you make things impactful? I remember being impressed by your experience of involving comedians in spreading clarifications on vaccines and COVID.
Humor over rumor.
Could you tell us a little bit how did you or anyone else come up with this idea and how it worked?
Yeah, the idea here is that we always moved to pre-bunking instead of debunking. People already know that if you, for example, have seen very polarized messages, it takes roots in your mind, and debunking doesn't actually remove it. It sometimes just, reinforce it, unless it's done in a very personalized, precision way. I mean, you're experts, so you know about this, maybe too well. And pre-bunking works differently. So one example, because you also work in pandemic, early on in, I think, February 2020, there's different ideas about mask. The science around the efficacy of mask was not very well established back then. And so in Taiwan, we have one side that says because we had experience with SARS, so it's a very toxic version of coronavirus. And people know at the time only N95, the highest grade of mask, are useful. And some people were saying only N95 are useful and everything else actually is just placebo. It doesn't work. Okay. And the other side says this is actually about ventilation, about aerosol. So any kind of mask will hurt you, and N95 will hurt the most. And so both sides are very polarized. They could easily start fighting with each other. But because we know they're about to fight, we also worked with the uncommon ground, the participation officers around the ministries to figure out what is the uncommon ground between these two people. And so very quickly, we roll out this very funny, very interesting meme featuring a very cute dog, a Shiba Inu dog, the Doge dog, actually, I guess. And then she was putting her paw to her mouth, saying that wear a mask to remind each other to keep your dirty, unwashed hand from your face. In Mandarin, we say 口罩勤洗手, and we have songs about hand washing and things like that. And then we actually measure tap water usage. It really increased after this meme pushes out. And when you see this very cute dog called Zongchai wearing this mask, putting paw to her mouth, you laugh, and then the tension is gone. You cannot be outraged anymore by those two polarized messages. And we also put the unmasked dog and the paw and put a red X to it, like don't put your dirty hand to your mouth. The mask is just to remind you to wash your hands, right? So it de-escalates this culture war about mask. So if I don't want to wear a mask and you wear a mask, I don't attack you because you're just reminding me to wash my hand, and vice versa.
But there was another kind of competition, because what I understand, there is something in human nature to argue as well, especially online, as we said, that you made a kind of competition for the people about what vaccine is better.
Oh, yeah, there's that too, right? So there was also the vax, anti-vax. But that's not 2020, because in 2020, there was no vaccine. So later on, we would have vaccine. And the idea is that in the beginning, there was AstraZeneca. And AstraZeneca, some people, especially elderly people, were seeing reports from Europe about the early AstraZeneca responses. And some of them lead to, kind of blood-related issues, clots, and so on. So basically, the idea was that some people were very afraid of vaccines. And again, it could be a anti-vax polarization war, right? So that was 2021. And then we published at a kind of scoreboard of people's preference to vaccine labels. So like how many people in the 70s bracket in each municipality prefer AstraZeneca over, say, Moderna, or if they're both okay. And by far, people in that age bracket prefer Moderna over AstraZeneca. But then the younger people, some of them are okay with AstraZeneca. So when the new AstraZeneca shipment comes, it goes progressively to the younger and younger people because the older people are saying, we'll wait for Moderna, right? So there's all in all, I think, 4 brands. There was AstraZeneca, Moderna, BNT, Pfizer, and also the homebrew, the Medigen. And again, our Medigen is very polarized. There's some people who only will get Medigen and Gaoduan, and some people who would never get Medigen. And so we turned what could have been a vax anti-vax into a competition, like my baseball team better than your baseball team, right? My brand of vaccine is better than your brand of vaccine. I got 4 brands just to make a case, including Novavax, and I still survive, right? And so again, this is finding the uncommon ground. The uncommon ground is that vaccination is good, and the fight is just between the brands of vaccines.
But I would allow us to also share us experience because it was also pivotal. So when we were, setting up our organization, we were planning to work on the human rights, how to reach out to the people on occupied territories. But, exactly at that days when we really decided to do the first, to meet, the COVID pandemic was announced. So we started to speak about how you speak about the COVID. But by the way, not when vaccination started. Way ahead was about one of our co-founders, Tara Piklun, who said, look, sooner or later, vaccines would be invented. We knew that there would be anti-vax movement because it existed pre-existed in Ukraine earlier. And probably the Russians would invent their vaccine because there was a discussion. Vaccines were not there. So we really, back then, secured some funding for the research. It took us some time because vaccines were still not there. It took kind of months. And we did the polling and the research. What do people want to know? And what are their concerns about vaccination? And then we figure out that really by the numbers, around 7% people believe in conspiracies. There are always, but absolute majority, we're really having a lot of, just real concerns. If I have a pregnant wife, if I have a small kid, if my mother has 3 diseases and she's 96. And the problem was that the quality media, a very good media, including youngsters media, also we're already starting little by little do some kind of debunking and later figure out during the social media, during the focus group, that this kind of humor approach, in a way when you mock the people who are anti-vaxxers saying there won't be horns if you take vaccine. People felt offended because saying I'm not crazy. I don't believe that there would be horns. The point was that actually you really need, first of all, to answer the questions of the real questions to the real people. We're not so kind of creative enough to think about how you make it in the humorous way or competition way. But the findings were quite clear. You really need to learn, and most of the people are ready to agree on something.
I agree. So you don't need to have humor or competition if you act early enough, right? If you pre-bunk, then there's a lot of runway for you to get, fact-based reporting, personal stories, educational articles. So we're not saying that humor or, competition is the only way to reach the uncommon ground. There's many ways to reach the uncommon ground.
I'm rather saying that by default, we figure out, but every single hour research, that people are more moderate.
Of course, it was just a hallucination produced by the antisocial social media because that's more addictive. If people feel they're engaging in a very polarized fight, then they get addicted to their phone and they can, see more advertisements. And after all, that's all there it is. In 2015, many platforms switched from a shared trending feed or a follower feed to a For You feed, a algorithmic feed. And the impetus was because they want to maximize the time people spend on touchscreen, because touchscreens were like really new at the time. The researchers found that if you do sensationalism, polarization, algorithmic feed, the autoplay on YouTube, and of course TikTok perfected that tactic, then people get addicted very easily, and then people will not be able to pull out of that addiction. And so then from that point onward, it strip mine the social fabric into polarization. And because people are in their own rabbit holes, they imagine the other side as much worse. And so when you ask them how polarized the society is, they start saying more and more polarized. While actually, if you do individual polling or community network conversation, people actually stayed quite moderate. But the perception of polarization just skyrocketed in 2015.
Your personal view, I really wanted to ask on the ideology behind big techs. I mean, is it money? Is it just pure capitalism? Or is it a lot of ideology behind doing that? I mean, you've just explained, of course, it makes more money, obviously. But people like Musk, it's obviously not only about money.
I don't think it's purely about money, but I think competition for people's attention is a big part of it. I think, for example, when YouTube first switched to autoplay, or when TikTok first switched to shorter form videos, it just grabbed a lot more attention from people's, so that their competitors, even though they know the pollution it will cause to the mental health, they cannot help but switch to a similar arrangement because they were afraid of losing people's attention. And if you look for the Facebook files, they knew about the consequences, but they feel because of competition, they cannot do otherwise, right? So that is one part. The other part was that there's this collective trap. A year and a half ago, there was a study that says, if you ask an undergrad in the US using TikTok to quit TikTok, you will have to pay them around $60 per month. They lose that much utility, fear of missing out, FOMO. But if there's a magic button you press and everybody around them quits TikTok together, then they're willing to pay you $13 per month. Here is a poll survey, right? It's very rigorous. And this is even a higher degree of a collective trap than, say, a luxury brand. Like if you're in a certain social class, everybody has a LV or something, then you can feel, if I don't have that, I lose out on status, so I have to buy it, but I lose money because of that. And if there's a magic button, I pay half a LV price to make sure everybody don't use LV anymore, no luxury. This is actually better. But this is sometimes seen in luxury goods, but this is seen in a very deep degree on TikTok.
How then you compete in this competition if you are a government, if you are a public interest journalist, public broadcaster? How do you, even enter this competition?
Yeah, so two ways, right? One is you acquire a TikTok like platform, and then you turn it into free software, into open source, so that people can freely choose which software to use to consume that content. The EU, for example, passed a Digital Markets Act that says if you send a message on WhatsApp, for example, WhatsApp cannot say you can only receive it through WhatsApp. It has to interoperate. It has to bridge with other instant messengers. So people have a freedom to choose instant messengers so that people don't have to, pay the FOMO price when they move away. When they move away, they still keep the contact. They can still keep the messages. So something about that interoperability is very powerful because then it avoids the collective trap altogether when people can migrate to different things. When I was a child, when you have a bank account, you can only get cash from the ATM of that bank. So new bank, impossible to compete because all the good ATM places are taken over by other banks. But then the government intervened and say you can charge a transaction fee, but all banks' ATM need to accept all other banks' ATM cards. It's called The idea is 金融卡, so that it's convergence between the different bank systems. Or if you switch to a different telecom, you should be able to carry your number with you.
So there's a question, for example, for some journalists and broadcasters. Okay, X, former Twitter, has become just unbearable. We will leave it. So you think the strategy should be the other way around. You should be there, but just act different.
So two ways, right? As I said, one way is just to buy Twitter or buy TikTok, right? Elon kind of bought Twitter, but did not really turn it into a decentralized platform. Some other team did, and it's called Blue Sky. And we're now also trying to help people to buy TikTok. So there's a People's Bid by Kevin O'Leary, Frank McCord, and so on, putting on $20 billion bid. So if they get TikTok, they promise to make it decentralized, interoperable, so that people are not trapped into the logic of that app anymore. So we'll see whether it goes through. But buying TikTok and turning it open, or building a Twitter alternative like Blue Sky and keeping it open, that are the two routes. And interoperability, like number portability, is a core in both routes.
In most cases, it's kind of a macro level. On something else, we hear in Taiwan, when I was also listening quite a few new interviews of yours, there was one which was very peculiar for me, because the anchor of a very classical media station was kind of very much pushing you on the political issues. Like, I know you're, non-partisan, but can you really express your opinion, on China, on things, on that? When we are coming here as Ukrainians, we speak to, people in Taiwan, and they're saying that, it's a very polarized society. Today, there are issues happening. They are concerned about the Chinese influence. First of all, it's a country. There are existing parties. There are existing political views. And sometimes for us, it's tricky. Who are the agent? Who is a paid kind of troll? Who is a political opponent? And where is a genuine sentiment? How do you put maybe for yourself some red lines? What is for you is being nonpartisan, navigating in this environment, but then also, I can say, in Ukrainian, there is a threat of China. With every Taiwanese almost we speak, they all speak, they're expecting or being afraid of the invasion, and they're concerned that there is disinformation. You speak so much about cyber attacks, all that things. So for you, how you define this? What is for you being nonpartisan? How did you navigate in the political environment, and where the red lines, how you defined all the threats? Being a Taiwanese, it's your country, you built, you fought, you live for it, so you really understand that there are some partisan things. We don't want to have a war. We don't want to have an invasion.
Yeah, I think there's, broadly speaking, two red lines, right? First, I think if you remove fundamental freedoms, that is not accepted. And it doesn't matter whether it's the state removing the freedom of expression in the name of security, censorship, or whatever, or a foreign actor crowding out the conversation around democracy with 200 million robots posing as humans, posting advertisements, and so on. This is not speech anymore. If you have fake accounts, paid advertisements, micro-targeting people, and just crowding out normal democratic discourse, because in our constitution, although we have freedom of expression, we never protected robots from having freedom of expression. So to me, that is a red line. If the exercise of such astroturfing, trolling, or things like that crowd out actual speech, then to me that is actually a kind of censorship, right? It's not censorship in the sense of cutting subsea cables, although they do that too. But also, it is also censorship in terms of disabling actual freedom of speech and association. So if it infringes upon fundamental freedom, to me, that is a red line. And the other red line that I can see is that if it makes it difficult for people to associate, so even if individuals have their freedom of speech and so on, if you destroy the social fabric so that people distrust each other, hate each other, across not just political lanes, but also religion, urban-rural, intergenerational, gender, you can name it, right? So in many jurisdictions around the world, people are just so polarized that one polarizing political topic can also polarize along all these dimensions. And so even though, okay, they all have freedom to express, but there's no social solidarity anymore, no connective tissue anymore. And to me, attack on that social connective tissue is also a red line. So fortunately, even though in Taiwan, we are all very vigorous in our political conversations, we are the least polarized when it comes to urban-rural, when it comes to different age, when it comes to different genders and things like that. And I think that is our connective tissue. Our spiritual traditions, again, we have many major religions, but none of which over 51%. So this plurality in other non-partisan dimensions keeps us connected as a society. And it's actually difficult for the adversaries to break through all these connective tissues. And I think that is very important as well.
What do you do from the security point of view? I think because you're speaking a lot about all these attacks, the real attacks, because yes, cyber is the way of waging the war. I love the phrase you said that, we are earthquake country. So you're always expecting something because it couldn't be planned. On the question, what do you think will happen with China? And so we're living here and the earthquake will come without any, announcement. What is important for Taiwan to be prepared from the security point of view, from the digital security point of view? I'm speaking more from, we are now concerned about the dependency on the Starlink, that kind of things. That was something new. It's a kind of a new concern, which was not there in 2022.
So in Taiwan, we, of course, want a plurality of providers. So not just subsea cables, but also microwave and satellite. Not just low Earth orbit, as you just mentioned, like OneWeb here, but also mid-orbit, like SES, and high-orbit, geosynchronous. The idea is that it's very difficult for a single adversary to disable all three orbits at once. Right? It's like physically in different places. Even in low Earth orbit, we also want to work with different providers. And also in terms of hyperscalers, I understand, for example, that Microsoft work very closely with your digital transformation ministry to put the services like Diia and so on to the cloud. And you also work with Google on that. And we also work with these two, but also Amazon, so that if the subsea cables are cut, the regions of those hyperscalers in Taiwan, we can move freely among those three different cloud providers. Again, you have to destroy all three in order to deny us communication. And another good thing about this is because then you don't go to the same vendor for all the different parts of the stack. So the different vendors, they will have to talk interoperability, again, open protocols. So you're not locked in by one single vendor. Because if your computation, your communication, your storage, your authentication all go to the same vendor, and that same vendor someday turns against you, or maybe not against you, but was cyber attacked, then you're gone, right? There's no redundancy. But if each stack belongs to a different vendor, then you can always step in and plug and play like Lego blocks, the different vendors. So the plurality of providers, that is essential in our communication and computation resilience.
You mentioned that Taiwan is learning from Ukraine, but I want to understand more. Is it like learning because you saw something happening and that's what we should do? Or you're really seeing clearly some particular things, which Ukraine is doing? So are you learning both from our mistakes, but also our solutions? As it's written in one of your platforms, how do you generally feel about what's going on with our war against us?
I went public several times saying that I stayed up at night just refreshing the Kiev Independence website, trying to get every scrolling text of what's going on. And I think that's really taught us the importance of keeping independent media flowing to the overseas community during times of escalation, because only real-time input can fill the vacuum of information ecosystem. If you don't have trustworthy, robust, independent media reporting, then all those deepfakes, all those generated stuff and so on, no matter how low quality, would just flood the information ecosystem. And once people go there, it's difficult to recover, right? So we always, when we plan for our resilience, for earthquakes, natural or unnatural, the dedicated bandwidth, for emergency response teams, including the correspondence from international media and so on, that was always on our highest priority list. And so that was one very concrete thing we learned from the Ukrainian experience. And the other thing, of course, is the backup of the critical systems, the core communication networks and so on, to the cloud, right, to the hyperscalers, so that it becomes location independent. That is the second thing that we have learned. But I think all in all, we see so much of ourselves in your situation. I don't think there's any anti-Ukraine party in Taiwan. Everybody's pro-Ukraine. And we very much expressed our willingness to support. I personally also was, I think I recorded something for a Lviv press conference not long after I became the minister, to support the power generators, support the laptops, support the communication equipment, and things like that. And so, I mean, we can offer only civilian support after all, but I think the communication, the societal resilience is also a key part in your ongoing process.
And thank you for that. In terms of challenges to the Taiwanese democracy, again, where do you think the most challenges lie? Because we've been asked many things. For example, we've been asked, what if China invades and there are pro-China people and they will greet the Chinese here? How do you persuade people to come to the other side? And how do you talk to these people, which in case of invasion could act like that? But again, that's potential speaking. In reality, when the invasion took place in Ukraine, it looked very interesting. Not all people who spoke Russian and went to the Russian church agreed to the Russian people. But what do you think in the shadow of this potential scenario of China invading?
First of all, I think internally, if you ask our people, there's no anti-freedom faction, right? People who are very loud about this political issue, that political issue, none of them are against freedom of speech. What would that even mean, right? So they're all very pro-freedom. So while there are differences of opinions in terms of culture, language, whatever people-to-people ties they have with the culture across the strait, I think nobody wants to go back to the martial law era of censorship, of top-down clamping down on freedom of speech. I don't think there is a single faction in Taiwan that is saying, we have too much freedom, let's just, not speak. Not possible. However, if you see the situation within the Beijing regime, there are journalists, starting around 2013 or so, they enjoy less and less freedom. And previously, around more than 10 years ago now, there was a very thriving blogging community from within the Beijing regime. And people thought for a while that this blogging thing, can be a new decentralized independent media, public interest, and so on. But then, because of social media, I guess, and the Beijing regime felt the threat of people associating horizontally, then they start pushing out this so-called harmonization attempts. And so the press freedom, the speech freedom become less and less. So I think in Taiwan, we have a uncommon ground domestically, which is this pro-freedom stance. And I think that is the message we also want to send to the world. If people around, for example, the US, the left and the right, I think the one thing they can agree is this freedom. Technology should advance freedom and advance security. And that's the thing they can agree. Across the Atlantic, the same. So Taiwan will be truly in danger if our friends in Europe and in the US fracture domestically and also across the Atlantic. If they manage to, at least agree on the importance of freedom, then Taiwan is safe. And if they become so polarized that they become even polarized around the freedom issue, then that's the point where we become truly in peril.
I wanted to say other things, not formulate the question differently, because not about the concerns of the Taiwanese democracy. I actually want to understand why democracy works in Taiwan, why this society, after 37 years of martial law, made it. Not everybody, not every society. There were societies which were democratic and went the other way. But somehow there are not so many. There was something. Why it worked.
And also with remarkable few amount of violence. That is the other part, right? So Taiwan was able to do democratic transition largely without a lot of bloodshed. Right? So that's two things. One is people don't want to go back to the non-democratic, autocratic past. And the second is that we made this transition with remarkable peace. I think these two are related because in some jurisdictions, when there is a very violent uprising, there's then a part of society that feels left behind, feel wronged, and so on. In Taiwan, we always made sure when we do this transition, the people who work with the previous regimes, they're not entirely left behind, that there is a bridge from where they were, to where we are now. And there's this emphasis on the younger generation leading the change. And that is, I think, one of the key part of this. No matter whether it's the Wild Lily movement or Sunflower movement or the many other movements in Taiwan, it was always people who are 18 or even younger than 18 that is spelling out the direction. And if they're younger, that means that they're not part of the old us versus them binary partisanship or fight or things like that, but they represent a novel direction. So I think the systemic improvement in Taiwan's democracy stems from we being a very young democracy, yes, but also a democracy that is built largely with the young people instead of, just for the young people, again, with the young people. And because internet, personal computing is also big here and appear roughly at the same years, right? So personal computers and democratization, roughly the same year. The World Wide Web, the browsers, and the direct vote of president, largely the same year, 96. And so to us, technology always served democracy. Not the other way around, not technology dominating democracy. And the young people are very good with technology. That's true everywhere in the world, right? So the young people feel they can contribute. And that is the difference, because when technology serves democracy, the young people are also the servants of the public service. But if it is the technology destroying democracy, the young people are pitted against the democratic institutions. But in Taiwan, we don't say that and we don't do that, which is why our 15 years are top of the world when it comes to the feeling, the agency they have to change the society.
Final for an advocate of sleep as a person today who slept very little and because of that was rude to the colleagues, unfortunately, a lot of them. Can you give us advice how you make this 8-9 sleep, how you organize your day? Of course, we can always complain we lived during the war, air raid, young mother, but you promote this philosophy of sleeping. Why? Tell to our audience and listeners.
By the time you publish this, my short documentary about my life, Good Enough Ancestor, will be online. I'll post it to many platforms, including Truth Social and Blue Sky. And the point is, I was born with a heart disease. And the whole of my heart means when I was 4, the doctor told me and my family, this child only has a 50% chance to survive until surgery. Okay, I got the surgery when I was 12, so I'm good now. But for the first 12 years of my life, I go to sleep. I don't know whether I wake up. So I always feel there's a coin flip. If it lands wrong, I don't wake up. So I have a training in my mind. It's called publish and then perish, so that I have to record what I learned that day. When I was 4, it was with tape recorder, and then gradually with keyboard, and then with internet and so on. So I just document and hopefully publish everything before I go to sleep. And then if I don't wake up, that's fine. Because in the public domain, people can then use it. So which is why I call this title of the film, Good Enough Ancestor. I only have 1 day's time. I don't have time to be a perfect ancestor. And perfection is boring anyway. It takes possibilities away from future generations. I'm just good enough. And so this good enough ancestor means that you don't need to reach perfection. And there's a crack in everything, but that's how the light gets in. And then you can sleep very well.
A very much alike philosophy of Natalia's, because I'm the one who is always taking time to make it perfect. And she's it's good enough. Just let's roll.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.